car prices have gone through the roof if you can find one at all, right?
Indeed. And, the high interest rates and the rising insurance premiums aren't making car ownership any less expensive.
The car market did not cool. It cracked open. Millions of vehicles sit untouched, while interest charges pile up like sand in an hourglass that will not stop. Values are slipping faster than owners can read their statements. Lenders are freezing, factories are idling, and the people who thought cars were safe are watching equity evaporate. This is not a dip, and it is not a correction. It is a chain reaction that begins on the lot, moves through the bank, and ends in the driveway. If you own a car or plan to buy one, the next few minutes will decide what you do next. The lots no one visits. Across the country, there are oceans of metal and glass that gleam under sun and snow with a kind of stillness that does not belong in a business built on movement. Dealers count rows that used to turn every week and now sit through seasons. Inventory reports show more than 4 million vehicles stranded in place, and the number is only part of the story because time is the real enemy here. Days on lot keeps climbing, and the carrying cost climbs with it. And every sunrise is another charge that does not care whether a single key turns. Sarah in Ohio has 2 decades in the business and says experience did not prepare her for this. She stands in a showroom that once felt like a train station at rush hour and now sounds like a library. She prints a sheet that shows $3.2 million in inventory and a daily interest meter that ticks $4,800 before lunch. She is not ordering accessories or planning weekend events. She is managing a slow leak that will drain the business if the math does not change. The mid-sized sedans that used to disappear by the end of the week remain in perfect lines, and even bread and butter compacts that were once spoken for before they arrived now gather dust. A Ford dealer in Texas reads from a ledger because numbers are easier to say than admit. 247 new units on the ground, $11,639 in interest every day, just to keep them parked where they are. A monthly expense that looks like a mortgage on a building that produces nothing. He has not paid a bonus in months, and his credit line is at the ceiling. He offers generous finance terms and money off stickers that were sacred 2 years ago, and customers still shake their heads because it is not just price that changed. It is confidence. Transporters arrive half empty or not at all because there is no rush to move what will not sell. Detailers wait for cars that do not need cleaning. Car washes in dealer districts report the kind of drop that follows a storm, except there is no storm, only a quiet that stretches from one quarter to the next. When a buyer does walk through the door, every manager looks up together and hopes this is the beginning of a turn. The buyer looks at the sticker, checks a phone, mentions rates, and asks about trade values that are falling like stones. The conversation ends with a promise to think, and the door closes softly. How long can a business model designed for motion survive this kind of stillness? If the lots are frozen, then where is the pressure going? And what happens when the numbers on the back side of the market catch up with reality on the front? The wholesale freeze and the fantasy gap. Auctions that once felt like open-air stock exchanges now echo with no sale calls and reserve not met flags waving through lane after lane. Managers set floors based on last year's sheets because it hurts to admit what the market now says with every bid. Buyers raise paddles for numbers that fit today, and the two sides stare at each other across a gap that has become a canyon. An auction lead in Georgia says 6 out of 10 units roll away unsold, and the ones that do sell go to buyers who can live with razor-thin outcomes or losses they cannot avoid because their own lots are starving for the few vehicles that still move. Wholesale pricing has fallen faster than retail, and that is where the damage compounds. A truck that brought $45,000 at auction last year now sees $29,000. The advertised retail on the lot still reads $38,000 because the dealer cannot absorb the loss in a single cut. Buyers run the comps and wonder why the internet says one thing and the dealer says another. They wait. Time passes. Values slide again. The dealer finally cuts the price. The buyer checks financing and learns that rates are near double what they were. The buyer waits again. In this stalemate floor, plan interest keeps eating. Dealers extend terms and stretch incentives and try to buy time, but time is the commodity they no longer own. A bankruptcy attorney who speaks in numbers says 24 major franchise cases are on the desk, and the pattern is clear. Interest swallowed the margin, and the margin was not as generous as everyone believed. Repossessed inventory begins to arrive from failed stores, and it stacks at storage lots like waves of the same make and color and trim. Banks sell quickly to recover principals. Values drop further. Survivors try to compete with lenders who are not chasing profit, only triage. What happens when the bottom of the market becomes a moving target that steps down again every time someone tries to hit it? Negative equity turns households upside down. The owner who bought in the heat of the pandemic market believed the message that supply was scarce and prices would hold because scarcity and strength often travel together. Payments were stretched to keep the monthly number comfortable, and the note felt manageable as long as jobs were steady and values did not fall. Values fell. A family in Arizona walks into a store with a modest trade and a plan to downsize payments because inflation is cutting the month on both ends. They owe $52,000 on a truck that now appraises for $34,000. The hole is $18,000, and there is no simple bridge across it. This is not an isolated story. It is a pattern that is hard to see until the math lands in your lap. Used values down more than 20% in a year and a half. Wholesale down more than 30% in some segments. Retail has not caught up, and owners are trapped between a price they see online and a payoff they cannot change overnight. The dealer can bury some negative equity with rebates and longer terms, but longer terms are the problem disguised as the solution. 96 months is 8 years of payments on a machine that loses value every day. A customer accepts because the alternative is walking back to the same vehicle with the same problem and a heavier heart. Lease returns return with residuals written in a different era. The buyout price is higher than today's market, so drivers hand back the keys. Leasing companies eat losses and push those cars into the same used market that is already saturated. Values drop again. Independent dealers that live on quick turns find themselves holding units that will not move without a loss, and the loss is bigger next week than it is today. Rental fleets that plan to flip out of older units find that the exit door is not where it was, and the hallway is longer and darker than they remember. Some stores exploit the trap and sell protection products at a premium because the customer is staying with the car longer and wants to feel safer. Others refuse to play that game and watch their service lanes fill with owners trying to keep a vehicle alive for years longer than planned. This is how negative equity seeps into the corners of a household. It delays home purchases. It postpones savings. It changes the job search because commute costs suddenly matter more than the salary bump. How many plans bend when a vehicle that was supposed to be an asset becomes a bill that will not shrink? Credit tightens and repos surge. Approval rates that once felt like a formality have turned into a coin flip. Prime buyers who could name their rate 2 years ago now face quotes that begin with a 9 and sometimes climb into the teens for terms they did not ask for. Subprime programs that kept older vehicles on the road in working families have retreated to the back room or closed entirely. A finance manager who has seen every cycle says 720 scores that once cleared the desk without a conversation now come back with conditions that make the deal wobble. Lenders are not only pricing risk, they are predicting value declines and saying no to collateral that may be worth less than the balance before the first payment posts. Repossession companies feel the change first because they live downstream from denial. A veteran in Texas says trucks from 2021 and 2022 now appear on his nightly schedule, and the number has risen almost by half compared to last year. He drives past dark houses and empty driveways and leaves a receipt where an expensive key fob used to sit on a counter. Banks that never wanted to be in the car business suddenly own hundreds and then thousands of cars. Those cars flow to auction and the price floor shifts lower again. Insurance companies add another gear to the machine. When a financed vehicle is totaled, the payout is actual cash value, and that number is below the loan more often now. GAP claims spike. Customers without coverage learn what a deficiency balance feels like. Scores drop, and the path back to prime lengthens by years. Counsellors talk to families who did not miss their mortgage and did not miss their utilities, and still saw one delinquent car note erase a decade of careful credit building. Dealers lose the finance income that once made up the difference on thin front-end margins, and their most profitable department changes from the desk to the service drive. This is the point in the cycle when a market must find a clearing price, or it will grind itself into a stalemate that becomes a collapse. Lenders want evidence that prices have stabilized. Prices cannot stabilize while supply grows and demand shrinks. Demand cannot grow while credit tightens and confidence falls. What breaks this circle first, and who bears the cost while we wait? Factories idle and bets go sideways. Manufacturers built schedules for a demand curve that made sense in a world of easy money and cheap fuel and predictable habits. The curve is different now, and the old plan pushes vehicles into storage fields that stretch past fences and tree lines. A plant manager in the Midwest watches trucks roll off a line built to run at $2,400 a month, while dealers ask for $800 and the overflow grows. The company pays to carry and to insure and to move and sometimes to recondition units that sit long enough to need new tires and fresh batteries before they have ever met a customer. Suppliers feel the shock with less buffer. A missing chip or a single absent module stops an entire line and dries up revenue for a dozen firms that built their year around that work. Tier 1 providers cut staff and burn cash to survive the pause. Tier 2 shops lock doors and hope their best people will answer the phone when orders return. The just-in-time philosophy that once felt elegant turns brittle when velocity slows and every delay multiplies cost instead of removing it. The shift to electric vehicles complicates the picture in ways that marketing could not fix. Companies poured capital into platforms and plants and battery lines that required adoption curves that never arrived in the numbers the slides promised. Ford writes losses on a program that was supposed to carry a new story. GM works to scale a platform while inventory ages on lots that cannot carry more. Even Tesla cuts prices to keep throughput flowing, and when the brand that defined the category pulls levers that blunt, the signal is loud. None of this means the future is combustion forever. It means the near future is messy and expensive and full of choices that have to balance engineering with cash. While domestic brands wrestle with mix, foreign makers that focused on reliable, affordable segments win share where the customer still has money and patience for simple value. The lesson lands hard. You cannot abandon the middle of the market and expect to skate back across the ice after chasing the high-margin edges for too long. Communities built around plants feel the change in their bones. Restaurants near gates go quiet at lunch. High school fundraisers sell fewer tickets. Houses come on the market and take longer to go pending. The numbers that live in spreadsheets become lives that pace kitchens at night. When the machine slows, everything tied to it moves in the same slow motion. If the factory must change, and the bank must change, and the dealer must change, what about the buyer who is quietly deciding that the best car is no car at all? The buyer who walked away. A generation raised on phones and rides arrives at adulthood with a different list of priorities. Ownership is not an identity badge in the same way, and the idea of paying $700 a month for something that sits in a garage most of the day feels more like a penalty than a prize. Cities make driving harder on purpose because space is scarce, and voters like streets they can walk. Employers let people work from home more days than not, and the permanent commute shrinks. Transit and shared rides and electric bikes and scooters fill gaps that a car used to fill by default. Financial advisors who sit with 20-somethings hear the same sentence again and again in different words. I would rather invest or travel or pay down student loans or save for a place to live than carry a note that stretches past my patience. Subscription models try to meet that preference by turning cars into services, and fleets compete for attention by promising simplicity over status. Even outside major cities, families learn to coordinate schedules and share a single vehicle while saving the second payment for goals that finally feel reachable. Environmental thinking is not a slogan for this group. It is a filter that shapes choices. A car is not just a machine. It is a lifetime of fuel and maintenance and tires and insurance and depreciation and miles that add up to a footprint they can see when they open an app. When culture shifts, markets must shift with it, or they become museums full of the right answers to yesterday's questions. Dealers that survive will look different. Smaller footprints, fewer units parked in rows, more orders built to spec and delivered with less friction, service departments that treat loyalty like a product, digital closings that respect time, pricing that feels honest because games do not survive in a world where every number is public and every experience is reviewed. The store becomes a studio where the experience is designed rather than a warehouse where inventory is stacked. The winner is not the loudest. The winner is the clearest. With all of these forces pressing from every side, what can an owner or a buyer do right now to avoid being pulled under by a tide that will not stop just because they did not see it coming? Your survival plan for the collapse and the reset. If you already own, your first job is to know the present value rather than guess. Get 3 trade appraisals and a written buy bid and a real payoff from the lender. The number may hurt, but it is better to hold the truth in your hands than to find it at a desk when you are emotional. If you are underwater, understand that time and principal payments are your friends, not term extensions that hide the pain by spreading it over years. Build a sinking fund for tires and maintenance so that repairs do not force a panic trade. If you need to buy, wait if you can. Prices will keep bleeding while lots remain heavy, and wholesale remains soft. If you cannot wait, buy the least complex, most reliable vehicle you can find with a total cost you can live with at today's rates. Do not chase trims that load you with depreciation. Do not accept extras you did not ask for. Do not let a payment drive a decision that a full cost calculation would reject. Insist on a rate sheet from 3 lenders. Consider a credit union before you ever sit with a finance manager. If you are a dealer or a manager, turn the store into a risk engine. Cut aged units early rather than late. Stop buying with yesterday's guides. Bring your used car director into every new car pricing meeting because those 2 markets are now the same market. Train salespeople to speak honestly about negative equity and to help customers build service plans that keep vehicles on the road rather than pushing them into deals that will break later. Shift marketing from hype to help, because audiences are not blind to the storm and will reward the first voice that sounds like a neighbor instead of a megaphone. If you are a lender, communicate. Customers who feel trapped become customers who default. Offer principal reduction paths in exchange for autopay and insurance verification. Reward early curtailments on floor plans so dealers move metal rather than hide from the problem. You will lose less by being human than by pretending a spreadsheet can collect from a borrower who has stopped answering calls. If you are a policymaker, think beyond slogans. Transportation is an economic foundation, and when it breaks, the cracks run through every industry. Support skills. Training for technicians so the existing fleet stays safe. Expand transit where it works and remove barriers to housing near jobs so people do not have to drive as far. Build charging where it will be used and align incentives with reality, not aspirations. The market will not reverse because someone writes a headline. It will stabilize when the numbers on the ground change. The car market has finally hit its breaking point, and the crash is visible everywhere. Dealers are paying interest to store cars that no one wants. Owners are watching their equity evaporate. Lenders are redrawing risk maps, while tow trucks collect vehicles before dawn. Factories are idling production lines, and young buyers are walking away from ownership entirely. This is not the end of cars. It is the end of pretending the old system still works. What comes next will be smaller, leaner, and built for reality, not illusion. Those who adapt, dealers who sell honestly, lenders who price fairly, manufacturers who build for real demand, and buyers who treat cars as tools, not trophies, will survive the reset. The rest will vanish with the old market. If you want weekly playbooks that help you protect cash, avoid traps, and time your next move, subscribe now and hit the bell so you never miss an alert. Tell me in the comments your payoff, your appraisal, and your rate, and I will reply with a tailored next step you can take today. Share this with a friend who is shopping so they do not sign a 7-year mistake. The market is changing by the day. Stay ahead of it with us.